Hey guys, welcome to Big Loss Official. Today I have the current Britain's strongest man, very special guest, Adam Bishop with me. Adam, how are you doing, buddy?
I'm good, man. I'm good. I'm enjoying this fine weather that we're having in the UK, even if we are on a bit of a lockdown. But yeah, definitely nice and sunny out there, so can't really complain too much.
Good man. Um, I'm really thankful for you coming on the show today. Obviously, we've competed against each other many times. I'm sort of, dwindled and past it now. You're still on the way up. And we've competed against each other a number of times, but I want to go right back to sort of the beginning of your career, before I even knew you, and just kind of figure out what really got you into strongman in the first place.
Yeah, I guess as most people in the UK and around the world, I kind of watched World's Strongest Man on TV. I think the first time I watched it as a kid was like 1998, and I was kind of like hooked straight away. I watched it every single year, even though I was didn't have thoughts of competing at the time. I was playing rugby. That's how I spent my whole childhood. Everything was focused towards rugby, cricket, athletics. So I was really kind of sporting. I kind of watched it every year. I was kind of watched the years of Pudzianowski dominating, and yourself coming onto the scene as well. So yourself, Terry, obviously Felix, always around. So it was kind of great watching you guys compete and mix it up. And I didn't really kind of get my first proper taste of strongman until I was up at Loughborough Uni, and I got an invite to go and do some strongman stuff. And this was kind of way back when there was no kind of kit in gyms. It was a guy called Jason Talbot who had a business making equipment. He used to make the Atlas stones, used to make the logs and farmers walk implements and stuff. And we went and had a train. I had a weekend off from rugby in like a dusty yard in the middle of nowhere in Leicestershire.
I remember those days of just training in yards on the weekends. It was literally your gym training in the week, and then everyone would turn up at some kind of dirty yard and just have a go at strongman stuff.
That's it. And you'd kind of risk rolling your ankle on some kind of gravel track, and there'd be loads of different guys there, some like huge beasts, and then kind of guys like me, slightly skinnier. But yeah, I mean, I just kind of took to it straight away. I think I was about 102 kilos, still like 6'3", 102 kilos. So I was built like a lollipop stick. But yeah, it kind of just came naturally to me, and it's something I kind of played around with rugby and strongman for a while when I was competing in the 105s. And yeah, obviously kind of progressed upwards from there with my first comp. I started off with a 105s comp, Midland Strongest Man, won that. And then I think that year I got 6th at the UK's.
Yeah.
I think I was just behind a guy called Graham Hicks, who came 5th in the UK.
I've heard of him. Yeah,
you might have heard of him. I mean, you wouldn't recognise him from photos then and now.
To be fair, both of you have put some weight on since back then.
Yeah, I mean, the only difference is Hicksy's nose is exactly the same. So I always say he's grown into his nose perfectly.
He's growing into his, yeah. There's quite a cool picture of the two of you, isn't there, from your 105 days? And if anyone's not seen it, you need to kind of search out this photo, because you two are almost, I mean, he is even more unrecognisable. But you've both put some beef on since those days.
Exactly. I think that was like back in kind of 2010 we had that photo taken, and I mean, we were competing against Ben Kelsey as well, who obviously competed at World's Strongest Man in the Opens as well. So it was a bit of a kind of golden era, I guess, of kind of 105s that we've all kind of moved up and progressed up.
Yeah, it's interesting because a lot of under 105 athletes can't progress to heavyweights, whereas you and Hicksy have both managed to progress extremely well.
Yeah, I guess a lot of 105s, and rightly so, that maybe the slightly shorter guys. I know you've just done a video on short guys in strongman, and maybe they feel that they can't put the weight on to be able to compete with the open guys. And for me, it was kind of the reverse. Like, I was a really tall 105, and I actually felt like I was having to diet back and cut so much weight to compete in the 105s. I mean,
you would have been holding yourself back staying at 105.
And this is what I say to guys. Like, I get guys who, some of my good friends who are toying up the idea to drop down to the 90s, even though they're trying to push for the 105, just do another show at 90. I'm like, ultimately you need to be the best version of yourself, whatever weight class you are. So, if you need to go up to 105, don't be kind of stripping yourself back, because you will lose strength going back down to that kind of 90 just for one comp. It's massive for me.
It's funny you say that, because I had someone comment on the video about the shorter athletes, and he was saying how, but yeah, they can't compete with them, but there's lighter weight classes. But I think for all of us, it's about being the absolute strongest you can be. That's
Yeah.
kind of what Strongman was all about. I mean, when I started, there was no weight classes.
Yeah.
Eventually, like the 105s came into place, and now we have under 105s, under 90 kilos, under 80. I've even seen under 75 kilo strongman comps. But I think essentially yourself and guys like Hicks have proved that you can step up and you want to be the absolute best that you can be, not just the best small guy.
Well, this is the thing, and this is the way I looked at it. It was always, and you know, this is going to sound harsh on some of the lighter weight classes, but this is the way I saw it. Was, you know, I was the strongest man in the UK in 2011 under 105.
Yeah.
So that's like an asterisk, you know. I'm not the strongest. I'm the strongest under 105, and that was the kind of thing for me. In a sport like strongman, it is all about being the strongest in the world. You know, strongest in Britain, strongest in the world, whatever. But it doesn't take into account a weight class. So I was I definitely felt like I wanted to move away from that kind of asterisk of you know, strongest under 105 or whatever, or strongest junior, and I wanted to kind of push on for that kind of like ultimate title. And I think, yeah, more guys should do that. And I feel like a lot of people kind of go like chasing little titles and doing these random shows, are actually thinking about the progression of how they're going to get to the top, you know. Like,
Yeah,
when
I agree.
105s, and the same with the Opens, I just do competitions that qualified me for another competition.
Yeah.
So, you know, you did like obviously Midlands, then England's, and then UK's and Brits. And for me, it was south of England's, UK's, Britain's strongest man. So everything was a clear goal of progressing forward. I wasn't doing kind of like southeast London's strongest Trojan, you know. It was all kind of focused towards the end goal.
So your goal has always been like to be right at the top, to be the world's strongest man.
Yeah, it's always. I think I set myself a goal back in that dusty yard. You know, my first goal was to compete at World's Strongest Man by 2015. That was my goal back in 2010, and obviously I achieved that.
Yeah. What year was your first Worlds again?
Yeah, 2015 out in
2015
Malaysia.
was your first. Excellent. Yeah, I couldn't remember. I couldn't actually remember which year was your first year.
Yeah, I mean, I turned up, you know, about 130 kilos, you know, in awe of everyone. I remember I got on the flight. I think you were on the same flight from Amsterdam, and there was a lot of us on there, and they had to kind of move us around the plane because all the economy seats were together.
It's always great when you get a lot of us on a plane. I used to love it because you kind of be walking down the aisle and you can see the fear in people's faces.
Yeah.
And I was, you know, but back then I was a lot bigger than you are. And you can see the fear in people's faces. And as I'm coming up, they're looking at me, and I'll sit down. I'll be like, "You'll be happy in a minute." And then they suddenly see like the likes of Brian Shaw or Eddie or just Drunus or someone like that. And they're like, "Oh, yeah, I am."
Well, Zadrunas was a funny one because obviously Zadrunas was sitting in the row like along from me. He was across the aisle, and the flight to Kuala Lumpur was like 12 hours. And it wasn't until after 12 hours I realised that his wife was sitting next to him because he took up so much space. I didn't realise there was anyone on the other side of him, you know.
Yeah.
He said like 185 or something, you know. It was massive.
It may have even been the flight back from there. Zadrunas and his wife were behind me, and Rob Frampton, who you're very good friends with, was next to Zadrunas. And Zadrunas wouldn't put his wife in the middle or anything like that. Zadrunas decided to sit right in the middle seat, and he had Rob Frampton, who at the time, Rob was big. He was like,
he's like 160,
160, 165.
Yeah.
And then Zadrunas' tiny wife next to the window. It was just kind of funny. I was just sat like looking at them. I don't think Rob enjoyed that flight.
No, I can imagine not. Jesus.
But that was your first Worlds in 2000.
That's my first Worlds in 2015. Yeah.
So with the under 105s, I know you won the British. Did you ever compete internationally as a 105?
You know what? I probably had the unluckiest year. Every year, the winner of UK under 105s would go off and compete in the World 105s, and it was that year that the 1 year that the World under 105s didn't happen.
Oh man!
It was kind of in between. So I was gutted, and that kind of like, you know, obviously put some question marks. Should I do the 105s again and hopefully I can go out to Worlds? But yeah, the weight cut was getting stupid. I mean, I'd go from like 112 to 105 and back to 112 in like 6 hours, so it wasn't exactly safe.
No.
So that's the reason I kind of just pushed on for the Opens then.
Yeah, I actually train a lad who he's actually built very similar to how you were back then, and I use you as a good example because he's about the same height, 6'3", and he competed in a 105 earlier this year, and I really didn't want him to, but you know yourself when you've got athletes, you know you've got to support them if they've got their heart set on doing something, but he had to really diet down hard from about 118.
Yeah.
And he made it, and he won the competition. But afterwards, he was so ruined from the cut for weeks. It kind of ended up making him get injuries, and you know he's only just starting to kind of come back from it now. And I think seeing guys like yourself who have managed to progress, and like you've just said, I mean, it's so easy to just keep chasing the next comp at under 105. But if you really want to get the best out of yourself, you've got to allow that opportunity to grow.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you probably went from like an under 105 athlete to 125, 130 quite easily, being 6'3".
Yeah, well, do you know what? It was actually, it was relatively tough. I made a lot of mistakes in the early days of training. You know, I thought I was smarter than I was, and kind of undertrained myself quite a bit. So in my first year competing in the Opens, I think I was competing at like 117. And then I kind of just kept putting on 5 kilos. But yeah, you know, I was making a lot of mistakes. I was working as a strength coach for a rugby team at the time, and effectively I was still training as if I was a rugby player. You know, I was just undercooking the amount of volume. I wasn't taking into the fact that, you know, for a rugby player, the stuff that they do in the weight room is accessory to them being a rugby player.
Yeah.
Whereas for a strongman, the stuff we do in the weight room is like our sport. So that's our whole thing we need to do. So obviously, I need to be combining, like a rugby player would do a weight session and then a rugby session. My weight session should have the total load of the same as a rugby player's weight session and rugby session. So that's where I made some mistakes early on. And I think, you know, once I made those changes, then I kind of progressed quite a bit, both in body weight and strength.
It's funny you say that because I mean you're a very intelligent athlete, and you've got a real methodical approach to how you do things. But I think it's nice for people to hear that you made mistakes, because I always say I made a lot of mistakes early on, and I really did loads of mistakes of competing too much, mistakes with training. But most of us do, and it's the athletes that end up being good are the ones that can learn from them rather than giving up after the first mistake. You know,
100%. And without making those mistakes, as you know, Loz, you do obviously train a lot of guys. You can't like then work out, right, didn't work for me. Maybe I need to move on and do something else. Like people forget that. You can't just kind of take something from a book and apply it to athletes. You've got to know what works and what doesn't. So
finding out what works for you individually or your athletes. You know, what works for me, for say you, might not work for, you know, the next guy or work for me. And it is sometimes just taking little things from so many people. On my way up, I used to try and ask questions to as many people as I could. I was always trying to look for information and take little things. And someone would say something that just clicked and made sense. You know, you get like these different cues from different people, and certain things that people say, I was like going over my head. I was like, well, that doesn't make sense to me. And then someone else would say it in a slightly different way. And then suddenly you think, okay, I relate to that. And suddenly you can see these, you know, big improvements in whatever it might be, technique or your lifting or certain events. You can just make that progress, but it does take time, and you've got to be willing to be open-minded and learn from lots of people.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the reason you make mistakes is to learn from them, right? That's the whole point of it. And
if it was easy, everyone would be doing it, right?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, yeah, definitely. Jesus.
That's why I'm not doing it anymore. It's really not easy. I'm quite happy to sit back and watch you guys now. It's you know, I had a good career, but I really noticed the last couple of years there's been a real passing of the guard, if you like, in the UK. You know,
well, you know, like, I mean, when I first started out, you know, 2015, like it was impossible. You know, so much energy was used to try and break into that top 5. Like
the top 5 was kind of secured.
It was ridiculous. It was like, obviously Terry had been around forever, yourself, Felix, and then Eddie, who had come onto the scene and was holding that place as well. I mean, and then so there's a bunch of us fighting for that.
There was always that one spot, wasn't there?
Exactly, you know, and it was cutthroat, and to try and then break into it, but then stay there was incredibly tough, you know. So I don't people don't kind of realise that, you know, and obviously with like yourself, kind of stepping away, I guess, from competing, and Terry with his kind of change of priorities and change of shape and stuff, and you know, his retirement for a little bit. And I'm glad he's come back. there's definitely a kind of a change in the guard, I guess, which is kind of
Well, I
like
think it's
natural, isn't it?
natural. I mean, one of the reasons I've stepped back, and I really don't think I'll compete again, to be totally honest with you, is that I'm a very competitive person, and I don't want to make up numbers. So I would rather give someone one of the kind of, I mean, you're an established kind of guy now, but one of the guys that's kind of fighting for that fifth spot, if you like, I'd rather give them the opportunity to get some experience at the world's strongest man than take someone's place when I know in my heart of hearts I'm not going there to win anymore.
Sure.
It's
Yeah.
a bit different maybe with some of the one day shows, but at world's strongest man, it's the pinnacle. So if you're not going there to give 100%, then I don't believe you should go. That's just my opinion. And I know,
It's too
like,
much hard work.
it is, it's, people think it's a holiday. It's really not. You go in there to, it's a stressful competition, and it's, stressful physically and mentally. And the improvements of guys like yourself, guys like, I mean, both Stoltmans, they're doing absolutely unbelievable. And then we've got other great youngsters on their way. Ben Brunning's had a good year, unfortunately injured at the moment, but he'll be back. Luke Richardson,
Yeah.
and guys nipping at their heels as well. There's so many good guys in the UK that I would rather see you guys flourish now and sit back. I've had my time. So I'm quite happy kind of focusing more on this type of thing and talking to you guys and talking about you.
Yeah.
But I mean, you and me both have had a lot of injuries. And that's what I think a lot of people don't realize about you, actually. Because on your way up, you were quite quiet because you kept getting to that point of breaking through. And then you unfortunately had a lot of setbacks. And I want to talk about those next, actually, because there's been times where you were, particularly to the people that knew, were like, we got to watch out for this guy. He's really doing well. And then I think, was it first event at Europe's one year, you tore your bicep on the axle?
Yeah, I mean, Jesus, yeah. 2017 was an exceptionally bad year for me.
Was that the same year that you fell at Britain's as well?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's a
So,
great year to talk about then.
Exactly. Like, to roll it back to 2016, like I nearly made that World's Strongest Man final. It was really close. I made some really good improvements. I came to Britain's and the events were good for me. Like they were really good for me. And first up, shield carry, and I just blacked out. I was carrying that shield, and as you know, those shields, I don't think people realise how horrible they are.
We were training down at Rob's place beforehand. I think at Rob Frampton's gym.
Yeah,
I remember we did some training together on it.
We were on that shield he's got, yeah. And it was insane. It was going so good for me, and then I just blacked out, and just that was it. And as I fell, I kind of managed to get most of my body out of the way by luck, and I just kind of crushed my wrist a little bit under the shield.
It looked horrific. When people watching from the side, you could just see the reaction of the fans, and from the athlete's point of view, we saw you go down. We didn't know what happened. We didn't know if you could have completely blacked out and you'd really hurt yourself. But it was just a bit of a. Did you actually black out, or was it?
Well, this is the thing. So I didn't think so at the time. I thought I'd tripped, but then the more I've watched it back, I just display all the signs of someone who's passed out. I'm literally like
just
twitching,
that momentary.
Twitching. I've lost all motor control. My arms kind of up in the air. Kind of like tonic posturing, etc. So it was a really weird one. It's the only time I've had that. But it was maybe just the occasion got to me a little bit. And
do you think maybe going there, probably your first year that you kind of were a legitimate contender, do you think that extra pressure kind of got to you a little bit?
100%. Yeah. It's that extra pressure, especially on the first event. I tended to get a little bit lightheaded up before that first event and very kind of anxious about it. But yeah, it was definitely an issue. And obviously from there, I kind of tried to fight my way back into the comp. But by the time I got around to the safe press and the front hold, my wrist was swollen. It just wasn't really working great. So, front hold's never going to be a great event for me anyway. But trying to do it with a big fat wrist was not ideal. So yeah, that was the start of the year. And then 2017 Europe's Strongest Man is when I had my worst injury from Strongman to date, which was the ruptured bicep, which is like a badge of honor, I think.
So there, if you've got a ruptured bicep, you're doing well. You're a proper strongman.
Exactly. Backstage, we're all comparing our scars, But I went on to that, and I'd been working on a technique on the axle in the couple of weeks before to be able to get a false grip. I was having real problems cleaning the axle and then switching into a false grip at the top. So what I did was I I changed to a thumbless grip on the clean as well.
Yeah.
And, you know, I pulled it with this thumbless grip, and what I didn't count for is the fact that the thumbless grip, it causes your forearm to supinate a lot more. So, and it just pushed my bicep into a range it wasn't comfortable with. And yeah, tendon came off the bone, and the bicep popped up my arm a bit. You know, and I was gutted. Like, I was probably gutted.
I think when you get that first serious injury, it is absolutely heartbreaking.
Yeah, and I mean, it was 6 weeks before Worlds. I literally just had my invite to Worlds the couple of days before, and so, you know, I just kind of got straight on the beers after that. You know, I kind of found my sorrows, and that's probably why it ballooned up, and the bleeding was so bad, because I was hammered. By the time we were signing signatures at the end of the meet and greet, I was hammered. I can't remember any of that.
I was very similar to that when I did my lat in Europe's 2014, I think.
I think that's one of the worst muscle tears I've seen because of the overhead shot.
Well, I was actually leaner at the time as well. I decided I was going to really work hard, eat well, get my nutrition sorted. You could kind of see some muscles for a change, and you just see it rip. But I think, like, you know, when you go and you sort of just know, you know, it's gone, the first thing you want to do is just drown your sorrows.
Yeah, and that's, you know, the guys were feeling, you know, very sympathetic for me. I was fortunate. I called the surgeon from backstage. I called our medics at work, and they gave me the number to the surgeon. So once that was done, I was like, well, I can't do any more damage.
Was that through work?
Through work, yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah,
so you're quite lucky in that respect that you've got
massively lucky.
You know, such a great team. Because for those that don't know, you are a strength and conditioning coach for Harlequins.
That's it. Yeah, I've been doing it. Yeah, at the same time I've been doing Strongman, really. So
for those American fans, the Harlequins are one of the top rugby union.
That's it. Yeah,
rugby union teams in the country. And how long have you been working there for?
9 years now. Yeah.
You're still working for them now?
Still working for them now. Well, not right now because of the whole lockdown situation. No pro sport, but we'll be back soon.
Will they be back training soon?
Yeah. In the next couple of weeks, we'll be back in doing some form of training.
Cool. So they managed to kind of get you in to see your bicep.
Yeah. So I was really fortunate. You know, I obviously had private medical insurance as well, which was helpful. So I saw the surgeon on the Wednesday up in Manchester. So I tore it on the Saturday. The following Wednesday, I saw the surgeon, and then he operated on the Friday.
Wow, that's really good.
It's incredible. And, you know, he was this surgeon, Adam Watts, is probably the best elbow specialist in the country. He's done, at the time in 2017, he'd done over 290 bicep reattachments. Okay. He'd only ever had one re-rupture, and that was a rugby league player who played too early. Okay. So, yeah, I was very, very fortunate to get that pinned.
One thing I want to kind of get across is one thing you're very good at, and unlike a number of athletes, and I'll put myself in this in the past, a lot of people try and rush back. I think you were quite smart, and you decided you're going to rehab properly, you know, not compete in every single show that's happening. The injuries happened, you sort of accept it, and you kind of really put in a plan to get yourself back to your best. When did you compete again after tearing it in at Europe's?
So it was April, I tore it. I didn't compete again until November.
So you gave yourself a good kind of 6-7 months.
Months? It was fortunate that the calendar just fell that way. In all honesty, you know, World's Strongest Man had been and gone.
Been and happened, yeah.
It was before we started doing the World Tour final, I think, or the World Tour final had started, but I wasn't having an invite for that anyway. And then Johannes used to run the show over in Sweden in November.
Yeah.
Hell of a show. It was my first ever Giants live show back in November 2014 I did. You know, I kind of called them up and saw if they could have a place for that, and went and competed there. And it was nice to do a show with no kind of pressure. Yeah. Just kind of get back to competing before Brits in January 2018. So
I think that's quite interesting, because I think because so many of the top competitions are in the UK these days, you do feel that extra pressure. I always quite enjoyed going abroad, where you didn't have so many fans there, you didn't have so many friends and family kind of coming to watch. You could just go and be on your own and just have some fun at Strongman. Often I did better like that, because you don't put that pressure on yourself. But
yeah, definitely, it definitely feels a little bit more focused, isn't it? Because you're not kind of traveling up. You're probably traveling a couple of days before, and all the UK shows where we obviously travel kind of just before it's on our doorstep. So
yeah, no, definitely. Well, guys, I'm going to leave it there for the first half, because it's been this half we kept a little bit more glum and kind of disappointing with injuries. In the next half, we're going to talk more about some of Adam's achievements, how he's gone on to be absolutely one of the top strength athletes in the world right now. But thank you for part one, Adam. We'll speak to you guys next time.